Shadowing is a language learning technique that is simple in concept, but powerful in its impact on fluency. At its core, shadowing involves listening carefully to a native speaker and immediately repeating their words aloud, almost as if following them like a shadow. The key idea is to mimic not only the words but also the natural rhythm, stress, and intonation of the speaker. This method trains your brain and vocal muscles to produce sounds and sentence patterns that are authentic to native speech, making your spoken English more natural and fluid over time. Unlike traditional repetition, where learners might pause to think or analyze, shadowing emphasizes immediate reproduction, forcing learners to process the language quickly and instinctively, just as they would in real conversations. When practicing shadowing, the learner's attention is drawn to subtle aspects of the language that often go unnoticed in conventional learning. These include the rise and fall of intonation, the way certain consonants and vowels are pronounced, and the natural linking of words and sentences. For example, in English, words often blend together in speech, creating sounds that are very different from their written forms. Shadowing helps learners internalize these patterns without needing to consciously memorize rules. By repeating speech in real time, the brain starts forming neural connections that link listening, comprehension, and speaking, creating a more instinctive command of the language. One of the advantages of shadowing is that it allows learners to immerse themselves in authentic language input. Listening to real conversations, podcasts, or speeches exposes them to expressions, idioms, and colloquialisms that textbooks rarely cover. Repeating these phrases aloud reinforces their understanding and recall, making it easier to use them in actual conversation. Over time, this method helps bridge the gap between passive understanding and active communication, enabling learners to respond naturally in discussions, rather than hesitating to recall vocabulary or grammatical structures. Moreover, shadowing encourages a level of consistency and engagement that accelerates fluency. Because it combines listening and speaking simultaneously, learners remain actively involved throughout the exercise, avoiding the passive habits that sometimes occur in reading or writing practice. It also builds confidence as repeated exposure and practice reduce the fear of mispronouncing words or making mistakes. In essence, shadowing is more than just repetition. It is a dynamic practice that trains both the ears and the mouth, allowing learners to experience language in a way that is closer to how it is naturally used, making each practice session a step toward more fluent, confident speech. Active listening is a crucial component of effective language learning, and it plays a central role in the shadowing technique. Unlike passive listening, where one might hear words without fully processing them, active listening requires the learner to focus intently on every aspect of the speech, including pronunciation, intonation, stress, and rhythm. By paying careful attention to how native speakers articulate each word and phrase, learners can begin to understand the subtleties that make spoken English sound natural. Active listening trains the ear to detect patterns, accents, and expressions that are often overlooked in traditional learning methods, enabling learners to reproduce these elements accurately in their own speech. When engaging in active listening, learners are not only hearing the words but also interpreting the meaning, tone, and emotion behind them. This deeper level of engagement helps in grasping context and nuance, which are essential for fluent communication. For instance, understanding when a speaker emphasizes certain words or changes pitch at the end of a sentence, provides clues about intent, emotion, or emphasis. Shadowing leverages this aspect by requiring immediate repetition, reinforcing the connection between hearing and speaking. Over time, this practice strengthens both comprehension and verbal response, making conversations feel more intuitive rather than mechanical. Active listening also encourages learners to notice natural speech patterns that differ from written English. In casual conversation, speakers often shorten words, link syllables, or use contractions that may seem unfamiliar at first. Paying attention to these details through focused listening allows learners to internalize them, so their own speech becomes smoother and more authentic. This skill is particularly important for developing the fluidity needed in real-life interactions, where conversations rarely follow the rigid structure of textbooks. Learners who practice active listening while shadowing gradually develop an ear for rhythm, pacing, and connected speech, which directly improves their ability to respond quickly and confidently in dialogue. Additionally, active listening promotes cognitive engagement and memory retention. By concentrating on the speaker's pronunciation and speech patterns, learners reinforce their auditory memory and improve their ability to recall and reproduce phrases correctly. It also enhances the brain's ability to process language in real time, bridging the gap between understanding and speaking. This mental exercise helps learners internalize vocabulary, grammar structures, and idiomatic expressions more effectively than rote memorization, ensuring that they can use what they hear in meaningful communication, rather than simply recognizing it in isolation. Starting small and gradually increasing complexity is an essential strategy for mastering English through shadowing. When learners first begin, attempting long, complicated speeches or fast-paced conversations can be overwhelming and discouraging. Instead, beginning with short audio clips, simple sentences, or slow-paced dialogues allows the brain to process and imitate language without feeling pressured. These small steps create a solid foundation in pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation, helping learners gain confidence while establishing a strong connection between listening and speaking. By focusing on manageable segments, learners can pay attention to subtle details such as word stress, sentence melody, and linking sounds, which are often lost when tackling overly complex material too soon. Starting with simple content also helps learners build accuracy before speed. At the initial stages, the goal is not to repeat everything quickly, but to reproduce the sounds, tones, and patterns as precisely as possible. This careful imitation ensures that learners develop correct habits rather than reinforcing mistakes. Short passages, slow dialogues, and beginner-level audio provide repeated exposure to commonly used vocabulary and grammatical structures, allowing learners to internalize these elements naturally. As their skills improve, they can gradually progress to longer, more complex materials such as podcasts, news reports, or conversations between native speakers without losing accuracy. This step-by-step approach prevents frustration and makes the learning process more enjoyable and sustainable. Gradually, increasing complexity also challenges the learner's listening comprehension and cognitive processing. Once basic repetition becomes comfortable, moving on to slightly longer sentences or faster speech encourages the brain to process information more quickly and automatically. This mirrors real-life communication, where speakers often talk at natural speeds and use idiomatic expressions. By exposing oneself to progressively difficult materials, learners develop the ability to understand and respond to spoken English in real time, strengthening both fluency and confidence. The gradual progression also allows for continuous improvement, as each level introduces new vocabulary, expressions, and speech patterns, reinforcing prior learning while expanding linguistic skills. Additionally, starting small and progressing step by step reduces anxiety and builds motivation. Achieving small goals, such as successfully shadowing a short passage or accurately imitating a dialogue, provides a sense of accomplishment that encourages learners to continue. Over time, this structured progression transforms into a habit, making shadowing a consistent and effective practice. It ensures that learners are constantly challenged without being overwhelmed, which is essential for developing the natural fluency and confidence needed to communicate effectively in English. Consistency is one of the most important factors in achieving fluency in English, especially when practicing shadowing. Learning a language is not a one-time effort, but a gradual process that requires regular engagement. Practicing shadowing on a consistent basis, even for a few minutes every day, helps reinforce the connection between listening and speaking, making the brain more adept at processing English in real time. Daily practice ensures that the patterns, vocabulary, and pronunciation that learners are working on remain fresh in their memory, gradually transforming new knowledge into automatic skills. Without consistency, progress tends to be slow, and the improvements gained from previous practice can fade quickly, making the learning process frustrating and less effective. Regular practice also allows learners to develop a rhythm and routine in their language learning. When shadowing becomes a habit, it becomes easier to dedicate focused time to listening carefully and repeating aloud without distraction or hesitation. This repetition over time strengthens neural pathways associated with language processing, helping learners recall vocabulary, phrases, and sentence structures more quickly. By committing to consistent practice, learners gradually internalize the sounds and intonation patterns of English, allowing them to speak more naturally and with less conscious effort. The cumulative effect of small, regular sessions often outweighs sporadic, longer sessions because the brain benefits from repeated exposure to language. In manageable increments, consistency in shadowing also builds confidence. Language learners often struggle with self-doubt or fear of making mistakes, and irregular practice can exacerbate these feelings. By engaging in daily shadowing exercises, learners steadily improve their pronunciation, fluency, and comprehension, which reinforces their sense of competence. Over time, this confidence carries over into real-life situations, making conversations with native speakers less intimidating. The act of practicing consistently signals to the learner's brain that English is a familiar and manageable skill, reducing anxiety and enhancing performance during spontaneous communication. Moreover, maintaining consistency allows learners to track progress and notice improvements, which can be highly motivating. Small gains, such as clearer pronunciation or smoother sentence delivery, become evident when practice is regular, encouraging learners to continue. Consistency also provides the opportunity to experiment with more challenging materials progressively, as learners can build on prior successes without feeling overwhelmed. By making shadowing a daily or frequent habit, learners ensure that they are continuously engaging their auditory and vocal skills, steadily moving toward greater fluency. And natural communication in English * focusing on pronunciation and intonation is a vital aspect of improving English fluency through shadowing. Pronunciation is more than just saying words correctly. It is about producing sounds in a way that is clear, accurate, and understandable to others. Intonation, on the other hand, refers to the rise and fall of the voice, the stress placed on certain words, and the rhythm of speech. Both elements work together to make spoken English sound natural and expressive rather than flat or robotic. Shadowing helps learners develop these skills by encouraging them to mimic not only the words themselves, but also the way native speakers deliver them. By repeating speech in real time, learners internalize the subtle nuances of pronunciation and intonation, which enhances both clarity and overall communication. Through shadowing, learners become more aware of the small details that influence how speech is perceived. For example, in English, certain syllables are stressed while others are reduced, and sentences often have a melody that conveys meaning beyond the words alone. Paying attention to these patterns during shadowing helps learners produce speech that sounds natural and fluent. Pronunciation practice also includes mastering individual sounds that may not exist in a learner's first language, such as the difference between ship and sheep or the soft th sound. Intonation practice helps learners convey emotion, ask questions effectively, and emphasize key points, which are essential skills for real-life communication. Improving pronunciation and intonation through shadowing also strengthens listening skills, as learners focus on how words are pronounced and how sentences flow. They become more sensitive to the rhythm and patterns of native speech. This heightened awareness enables them to understand spoken English more accurately, even when the speaker talks quickly or uses idiomatic expressions. The practice creates a feedback loop. Listening carefully improves speech production, and speaking with accurate pronunciation and natural intonation reinforces listening comprehension. Additionally, focusing on these aspects builds confidence. In communication, many learners hesitate to speak English because they fear being misunderstood due to mispronunciation or unnatural phrasing. Shadowing allows learners to practice repeatedly in a low-pressure environment, helping them feel more comfortable producing sounds and patterns correctly. Over time, this practice makes speech more fluent, natural, and expressive, bridging the gap between understanding English and communicating effectively in real conversations. Asterisk confidence through practice is one of the most significant benefits of using shadowing to improve English fluency. Many learners hesitate to speak because they fear making mistakes, mispronouncing words, or struggling to find the right phrases. Shadowing addresses these fears by creating a structured and safe environment for repeated practice. When learners listen to native speakers and immediately repeat their speech, they gradually become accustomed to producing English sounds, words, and sentence patterns aloud. This repetition reinforces familiarity with the language, reducing the anxiety that often accompanies speaking, and allowing learners to approach real conversations with a greater sense of assurance. Regular shadowing helps learners internalize common phrases, vocabulary, and grammatical structures, making it easier to recall them spontaneously in conversations. The more frequently a learner practices, the more automatic these responses become. Instead of pausing to think about how to form sentences or pronounce words, learners begin to speak more fluidly, as their brain has already processed and rehearsed these patterns. This automaticity builds confidence because speaking no longer feels like a slow, effortful task, but a natural extension of the listening and imitation practice during shadowing sessions. Over time, learners notice that their ability to engage in conversations, answer questions, and express ideas improves significantly, which reinforces their self-belief and motivation to continue learning. Shadowing also encourages learners to experiment with language without fear of judgment. Since the practice is done individually and often repeatedly, mistakes are seen as part of the learning process rather than failures. This mindset shift is critical for building confidence, as it allows learners to focus on improvement rather than perfection. The constant exposure to native speech patterns also helps learners understand how English sounds in real contexts, making them more comfortable when interacting with native speakers or participating in discussions. By practicing aloud repeatedly, learners become more attuned to the flow, rhythm, and intonation of natural English, which further boosts their confidence in speaking accurately and expressively. Furthermore, confidence gained through shadowing extends beyond speaking to overall language skills. As learners become more assured in their pronunciation, comprehension, and sentence formation, they are more willing to engage in reading, listening, and writing activities, creating a positive cycle of improvement. This growing self-assurance transforms the learner's approach to English from cautious and hesitant to proactive and enthusiastic. Shadowing, therefore, is not just a technique for improving fluency, it is a powerful tool for building the confidence necessary to communicate effectively, turning hesitation into bold and natural expression and opening doors to new opportunities in learning, work, and life.